Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time today to attend our webinar on seeing your website fresh eyes. We hope you find it informative and come away feeling empowered to take your parish website to the next level. My name is Nico Karitzis. I'm sure I've worked with a lot of you, and I am a software developer in the Department of Internet Ministries. I have been blessed to be working with parish web hosting for over 12 years now, and I oversee the CMS development and parish web hosting of our department. So before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Please mute your microphone during the presentation. We will have time at the end for a discussion with Q&A, so we want to make sure that we make the best use of everyone's time during the presentation. As questions arise, please make note of them and feel free to share them in the chat or save them for the end when we open up for questions. Today, we will be talking about examining your website more critically. But first, I want to give you two things to think about as we're going through the presentation. So identifying your audience. Your website should be an effective way to communicate with your audience. But the question you need to ask yourself is, who is my audience? Think about who you want to visit your website. Are they parishioners looking for information on upcoming events and services? Are they newcomers looking for a new church home? Are they community members eager to experience the delicious food at your festival? For most of us, it is probably a mixture of all of this. Understanding your audience will help you create content that is relevant and engaging to them. If you don't have an idea of who you're trying to reach, it's very difficult to communicate effectively. So today, we will look at a few methods to help us understand our audience better. And second, what information do you want to share? What do you want your audience to know about your church? What makes your church unique? Craft your message with your audience in mission as we look at some of these tools and methods to help us get a better understanding of our users. So seeing things with fresh eyes, what is it we mean by that? As webmasters, we can easily get caught up in the details of our websites and lose sight of the bigger picture. Most parish webmasters are volunteers who have limited time to commit to the parish website. Many of us update our websites only when necessary, and even then, only focus on the specific task at hand. This can cause us to lose sight of the bigger picture. Seeing your website with fresh eyes lets you experience it as a visitor would. It will help you identify problem areas, improve your content, and ultimately make your website more effective. So let's jump in and take a look at some methods and tools we can use to help us view our website in ways we never have before. As a quick note, I want to thank the All Saints Greek Orthodox Church in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, for generously allowing us to use their website as an example during this presentation. I set up a few tools that we're going to be seeing today on their website 2 weeks ago, and we're going to be exploring what we can learn from those tools today. Based on the information we gather, they will be able to make some updates going forward to improve the experience and effectiveness of their own web presence. And hopefully, by the end of this presentation, you'll choose to use some as well, and you can also be making some improvements on your websites. So first, we're going to take off our metaphorical webmaster hat, and we are going to put on our visitor hat. This can sometimes be hard, especially if we're the ones who built these websites, because we know every piece of content, every letter, everywhere we put an image, and we know how we think it should work. But we need to try and step back and think about it as though we are a new visitor to this website. Try navigating as if you weren't the one who published that content. Is your information concise? Does the navigation seamlessly flow from one place to another? Are you getting stuck? Are there dead ends where you don't know where to go? Is the content up to date? Or do you still see information on Holy Week 3 weeks later? What about that photo gallery that used to get updated? Sure, it looks like the parish put a lot of effort into it years ago, but when was it last updated? Has the parish stopped doing photo-worthy things? As you begin to take stock in these little observations, try to understand the overall message to your visitors. Is it a lively, updated website that reflects your community? Or is it mostly a museum of things from the past with little to show for your current parish life? Depending on your goals for your parish website, you may find something completely different. But it's important to understand that the way your website presents information and the way it makes your visitors feel will have a major impact on what they decide to do with your content. Before moving on, I want to make a quick plug for our webinar session next week on spring cleaning for your website. If you're not already registered for that session, make sure you do that because we're going to be doing a deeper dive on cleaning out the cobwebs and getting your website into top shape. So once you've completed your own tour of your website, reach out and ask a friend or family member to take a look. Get their gut reaction, but also ask them to perform specific tasks. For example, can they find information on an upcoming event? How easily can they find your church's address and phone number? If they were looking for a new church to visit, Did they find the time of your services and helpful information for preparing for a visit? You can tailor the tests to your goals on your website. This is going to give you a lot of valuable feedback on where you can improve. Along these lines, you could also consider reaching out to other webmasters from this webinar or from nearby parishes. It's always helpful to get suggestions and advice from someone who is not as familiar with your website. And if they're a webmaster too, you could always return the favor and give them feedback as well. So once we've had a chance to do our own collection of feedback and also ask friends, family, webmasters, other people for their feedback, it's time for us to really dig in and try and explore this experience further. Since the start of 2017, mobile devices have accounted for approximately half of global website traffic, and this trend only continues to grow. As of the first quarter of 2023, mobile devices are now responsible for 55% of all website traffic worldwide. Using the specific example of All Saints, you can see that their traffic is slightly over the global average at 57% of traffic from mobile devices and just under 63% if we group mobile and tablet together due to their similar natures. These statistics shouldn't be surprising to any of us, but how many times do we actually focus on our website's mobile experience? Most of us edit our websites through a desktop computer, but as we just learned, more than half of our users are going to see it using a mobile device. So why does this matter? The experience on mobile is typically different than what you see on a desktop. Many of us build the content we are given visually based on what we see on our own screens. If that's as far as we go, we have no way to guarantee the majority of our audience will even see what we want them to see. Look at this quick example of the different experiences of the All Saints homepage. On a computer, we can see the site header, the navigation, and 3 partial columns of content, all without interacting with the site by clicking or scrolling. Now on mobile, we're seeing significantly less. The screen real estate is simply not enough to show all of the same content at once. Most of our page templates have stacking columns on mobile, which means the second and third column will stack below the first. In the desktop screenshot, you can see the live streaming and weekly bulletin buttons in the right column. But on mobile, users need to scroll around 70% of the way down your page just to find them. With the statistic we mentioned earlier of almost 63% of visitors using mobile devices, that means many of you users will most likely not even see those buttons at all. So what can we do about this? Well, luckily, there's a couple of easy testing options. The fastest and easiest way to test your mobile website is to use your own device. Make it a habit to pull out your phone and test any website updates before you consider your job done. Web developers will typically test on as many devices as possible, using as many browsers as possible. While this is a critical step for those of us creating new code, testing on 1 or maybe 2 devices should be sufficient for any content updates you're making on your own website. Don't like the way things look? Make changes. Try moving to different areas on the page, consider using a different layout that may complement your content better, or decide to reorganize the content entirely and move things that you think are more important somewhere that's more prominent for your users to see. Another option for testing is to use a mobile device simulator. There's a lot of options available, but one of the easiest ones to use is most likely already on your computer. Many browsers have the ability to simulate mobile devices right in their developer tools. On Chrome, for example, device mode lets you view and interact with your website through many different simulated device sizes. Let's take a quick look at a demo on using device mode in Google Chrome. So as you can see, this is the homepage of the All Saints website using my desktop browser. If I want to open device mode, I can simply right-click on the page and choose Inspect. Now, this first initial look may be intimidating for most of us because it's got a lot more information than we're used to seeing. In the column, we're actually seeing the HTML structure as well as the computed CSS styles that are building this page. For most of us, we don't need to care about that. We don't need to worry about it. If you do happen to do development or you're interested in doing some of these things, this is an incredibly helpful tool. But what we're interested in right now is device mode. So in order for me to open device mode, there's a little button at the top of the toolbar in the inspector, which is Toggle Device Toolbar. When I click that, you'll see the page immediately changes to show me the mobile view of the website. In my browser, I'm currently looking at this page as though I'm using an iPhone 12 Pro. I know that the dimensions of the device are 390 by 844 pixels, and I can now scroll through the page as though I'm on mobile. It makes it very easy for me to save my edits, check the page in mobile, and make sure everything looks great. You'll also notice that the cursor has turned to a circle, which signifies a tapping interaction on the page, which is how you would interact on a phone. And I can interact with the navigation and everything else as though I were on a mobile device myself. In order to get back to desktop, I can simply retoggle my device mode off, or I could choose the X to close it entirely. This is a tool that I hope a lot of us will become accustomed to using and make a habit out of using, so that in the future, all of our edits look great on desktop and mobile, since we know majority of our users are using mobile devices. So we're going to jump back in here and move on to the next section, which is how can we figure out what our audience is doing or seeing? What content is important to them? To do that, we're going to rely on analytics. There are many tools out there that are available for you to use, and hopefully most of you are familiar with at least one. Today, we're going to be looking at Google Analytics, Hotjar, and AWStats. So Google Analytics is a web analytics tool that provides insights into website traffic and user behavior. This is done by placing a small snippet of tracking code on each page of your website, which collects data on how users interact with your pages. It can be incredibly useful to collect this information so that you can tailor your website updates to fit the activity of your users. We're going to run through a quick couple examples and live demos from Google Analytics now to give you a better idea of the information that we can get through this tracking. So when I first load Google Analytics for the All Saints CBG website, I'm greeted with a dashboard. It's going to give me some quick information that is usually helpful to give me a good idea or an overview of how my website is performing. For example, I can see that in the last 30 minutes, I've had 3 different users visit my website. That is generally pretty typical for a parish website, especially during a weekday around lunchtime. I can also see how many users I've had over the last 7 days, which is 376. I've had 339 new users over that same period. It is going to differentiate between users who frequently come back, as well as new users who have not visited the site before. And I can see how many views my pages have. So doing some quick math, it looks like my users are averaging around 2.5 to 3 pages per visit. And then the average engagement time, so the average time someone spends on my website, which is calculated after a user has spent at least 10 seconds on the website, is around 1 minute and 20 seconds. If I want to get some more information, there's a lot more Google Analytics provides. For example, I can look at the user acquisition. It's going to give me a chart and let me know where my traffic is coming from. For example, this one here is showing me that my user source is typically going to be Google, followed by direct interactions, which means someone who typed in my website specifically and tried to visit it. And then below that, I also see Bing, another search engine, Facebook, and then a few more search engines, followed by a couple more Facebook and social media links. This can be really helpful if I want to know where my users are coming from, especially when I'm looking at doing search engine optimization. If I am interested in making sure more people can find my website, then I want to know where they're coming from and how they're finding me. And if I know that Google is one of my top sources of my traffic, then I can spend a little extra time working through Google Webmaster Tools to make sure my website is passing all of their tests and being listed appropriately. Next, I can look and see what pages my viewers are actually visiting. This is probably more important day to day for webmasters to know what content our users are seeking out. But I can see here that my top path page that is being visited is the slash. So that means my homepage. So people, by and large, are visiting the homepage of the parish website before going somewhere else. Below that, I see broadcast page is the second most popular, followed by the food festival, which is coming up next month, and then my parish calendar. And to round out the top 5 is sacramental forms. So it looks like they've got somewhat of a diverse grouping here of what people want to see. Typically, they're coming to the homepage, trying to find something. They're going to watch our broadcast. Then they want to know about our festival, anything else coming up in terms of events on our calendar. And then finally, if they are interested in doing sacraments at the parish or are already going to be doing sacraments, they're looking for the sacramental forms there and information. Using this chart, I can actually see where these change. So for example, on Sundays, the broadcast page is my top page by far, which would make sense because liturgies being broadcasted on Sunday mornings are going to be popularly viewed. Whereas on Saturday, my broadcast page is only the 4th most popular, but more people are viewing the calendar. So perhaps they want to know when liturgy is, or they want to know what other events are coming up in the coming week. And the last page I wanted to show on Google Analytics is one of the newer features in the newer analytics from Google. which is under their Explore tab. And this tab specifically is the path exploration. And this, to me, is a helpful way to find out what our audience is doing on our website and how they are finding our information. So in this tree graph, I can see from the session start, which means where they started on our website, majority of our users by far land on the homepage. After that, we've got broadcast, receiving non-Orthodox persons to the Orthodox Church, and then preparing for baptism. So these are the pages someone lands on. That means they didn't come to the homepage and then visit these pages. They either found it through a search, or they knew directly to get there, or perhaps it was posted on social media. But what we can do with this graph is we can click and see where users travel after they go to the homepage. So for example, here, majority of our users go from the homepage to the calendar. So out of our 309 users on the homepage in our sample time frame, we now have 75 viewing the calendar. If I dig into that, I can see now from the 75, 41 of them have gone back home. So we might be able to identify some potential issues here based on these analytics. Why are our users going to the homepage, going to our calendar, and then going back to our homepage? Are we giving them an opportunity to find other content? Are we trying to create a path for them to travel through our site? Or are users so accustomed to just going to our homepage because it's a set of links for them that that's how they navigate through our site? Keeping these things in mind, we can see that someone who goes to the calendar and then the homepage is actually going back to the calendar or the live broadcast tells me that users are searching for something, but they're not quite sure what they're trying to find. It's also possible that they were looking at the calendar and then they wanted to go view the live broadcast because there was a broadcast that was available, but they didn't have a direct link to it. So they went back to the homepage to find the button to the broadcast and then went to the broadcast. Now, I know through this website, there are direct links in the navigation to get to the broadcast as well as the calendar. So the user did not need to go back to the homepage and then back to our calendar or back to the homepage and then our broadcast, but perhaps users are more interested in seeing a button like what we're seeing here on our homepage. Keeping that in mind, as we're deciding to make updates to either the homepage or the calendar page or the broadcast page, we can use this information and the behavior of our visitors to change how we're displaying things. If we look at our live broadcast page, we can see that we're using a full width video and then a link to our YouTube channel. But here we don't have anything that links to our calendar or any way to know what the upcoming schedule is. Similarly, on our calendar, we can see the calendar and we can subscribe to it. But what if there's more information about a specific event? What if we have a whole page dedicated to our festival and our festival is here? We don't have any way to link to that. So finding the behaviors of our users and then taking a look at our website and trying to figure out how they're using our website can help us decide to make some changes that can improve their experience and in turn, make it more likely that they will either return to our website or perhaps come to our parish and experience what it is they're looking for. So that was Google Analytics. There's certainly a lot more we can do with this. There's entire professions built around analytics, going through setting up the analytics further, setting up your conversions and how you're calculating what's working and what's not. I'm not going to go through all of that in this session. That's a bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, but I want to make sure you at least use analytics on your site. And then if you are, that you don't just have the code there and forget about it. And then maybe every 6 months say, hey, we had 10,000 viewers over the last 6 months, but actually use them regularly and see what your users are doing, see where they're going, and make sure that that is aligning with what you want your users to see. If you don't have Google Analytics already on your website, you should consider adding it after this webinar. So Google Analytics will only collect data on your website once their code is present, which means if you haven't had it up until today, you can add it today and you can start getting data as of today, but you're not going to know what your users did the last 6 months up until now. So the best time to add Google Analytics is today. And we do have an article on how to do that, especially if you're using the Evolution CMS on your site. We have step-by-step instructions on creating your account, creating the snippet code, getting it on your site, and making sure it's working. So we will make sure to share that with you at the end of this presentation. Hopefully, most of you were already aware or had at least heard of Google Analytics, but I am guessing that fewer of you have used or even heard of Hotjar. Hotjar is a behavior analytics tool that provides insights into how your users are actually interacting with your website. There's a lot of crossover between Hotjar and Google Analytics, but where I think Hotjar really shines is the information it provides regarding user interactions with your site, such as navigating, clicking, and even scrolling. For this demo, we're going to be using the free plan, which captures the first 35 sessions of each day. While this isn't going to give you a full picture, because as we know, we're seeing close 70 to 100 sessions a day on this parish website, we're at least going to be getting some data that will really help us paint a full picture of what our users are doing. So I'm going to jump into that demo now with Hotjar. So when I first visit Hotjar, there's two tools in the free plan. They're going to be mostly helpful to me. The first is recording, and the second is heat maps. So we'll start with recording. Here I'm going to see from the 35 sessions that are recorded a day, what the recordings are going to tell me. First, I can see the date when it was recorded. I can see the amount of actions the user took, the amount of pages they visited, and the duration of time they spent on our website. When viewing the recording, it's going to skip over inactive periods. So this could be, for now, this one says it's a 9-minute and 17-second recording. That doesn't mean the user was actively reading our website for 9 minutes. Perhaps they visited 2 pages, walked away to get some coffee for 5 minutes, came back, switched to a different tab for 2 minutes, switched back and closed the window. But Hotjar in our video is going to show us the action that is going on here. It's also going to show me what size screen they had, as well as the browser they were using, and then the operating system they had. For a lot of us, that may not be as important. If we are doing development and trying to figure out specific things or see specific screen sizes, that is certainly important information to have. And then lastly, they're going to tell us the landing page. So I know that this session started on the home page. This one started on the Sacramento forum. So someone was maybe emailed a link to that or received that in another way. Someone else started on the food festival. But what we can then do is choose to play the recording. So let me open this recording and we'll see what the user does. So it's going to highlight their cursor. It actually is almost as though we are watching them surf our website with them. So we can see where they moved their mouse, what they wanted to click. Hotjar is going to try and identify certain actions to let us know how the user may have felt. That is not always accurate in my experience. For example, one of the recordings I viewed recently had a user visit a calendar page, and they wanted to go back 5 or 6 months. And in doing that, they clicked the button quickly 6 times. And Hotjar understood that as someone, as they called it, rage clicking, someone who was upset with our website and so frustrated, they just clicked their mouse over and over and over again. But for this, we can see that the user wanted to visit our website. They looked around a little bit. They may have scrolled up or down. It looked like they were trying to find some specific information. They went to the calendar itself. They were looking around for certain dates. Keep in mind, the recordings actually hide the numbers on the page, which is a privacy practice by Hotjar. So we can't actually see the specific number that they're viewing here, but we do know that when the user visits the calendar, they can see the dates. And then we can see that they looked for a specific event to get information, and then they closed their browser. There's a lot more we can gain from these videos if we watch them. We perhaps only want to see videos for mobile, so we can go back and check that if we want to see how our users are interacting on mobile devices. And this is a really helpful tool to see not only where users are going, which Google Analytics told us, but how they're getting there. Where are they scrolling? Have they gone up and down the page 5 or 6 times to try and find something? Does it look like they're lost with their mouse and they're trying to go back and forth between pages? Or does it look like they know exactly where they need to get in order to understand the information they're seeking out? So I'm going to jump over from the recordings to now looking at heat maps. Heat maps is perhaps my favorite tool that Hotjar provides because it makes it very visually apparent what users are doing with our website. So this is the heat map for the homepage of the All Saints website. I can see, based on highlights, the red areas are where more users click. The yellow down to blue is where less users are clicking. And then I have a 1, 2, and 3 to see the most popular click links on this page. The top click link here is the All Saints Food Festival, which is coming up within the month. Next, we've got the calendar is the number 2 clicked item, and then the live broadcast is number 3. So not only do I know users are navigating from my homepage to the festival, calendar, or broadcast, but I know they're using the main navigation to get there. I can scroll down the page and see that there was 1 click on the actual broadcast button. There was a handful of clicks on the weekly bulletin button. If we scroll further, there's a second link to bulletin here. There's also a link to calendar here that some users are clicking. There's an upcoming flea market event that is being clicked. And as I scroll down, I can actually see, for example, 2023 stewardship, which is important to all parishes, does not have any clicks on the homepage. So we may look at that and say, we really want to push stewardship more and make sure that people are aware of the stewardship forum and that everyone's registering for the year. What can we do to make stewardship more visible and more accessed? Now, another option than clicks with the heat map is also scroll. So let me change over to that view. So now I'm seeing a heat map based on scrolling. It's showing me down here that the average fold, so the average spot that is visible on the screen without someone scrolling, is just below the live broadcast button here on desktop. If I scroll down, I can see that getting down to this weekly bulletin area, the green area, only 75% of my users go that far. So that tells me 25% of my users don't even scroll the homepage at all. That's important to keep in mind because perhaps you've put some content on your homepage a little bit further down the page. You figure it's not that far down. I'm sure a lot of users will see it. You've already lost 25% of the eyes that could see that just because it's too far to be able to see without scrolling. Now, if we look further, we can see that can drastically drop off. Only 50% of users make it as far down as this blue line. We have an upcoming flea market event. We have the information on live streaming and a link to our calendar here, as well as our phone hours, our office hours, and our contact information. Over half of our users have never scrolled that far to see it. Perhaps that's not a big deal because a lot of our users are frequent visitors to the website and they've seen that in the past. But we could also think this could be seekers who are coming to try and find a new church home. And if that's the case, they may have not scrolled far enough to see that. Or perhaps we really need to make sure that people are seeing this flyer because the event is coming up in another week and it's not being seen by who we want to see. So that may tell us we need to make some changes just to the organization of this page to make sure people can get further. As we scroll even further down, we had talked about stewardship a little bit before. Only 25% of my users on desktop have made it down this far on the homepage. And then by the time we get down to around the footer, we've got about 15% that scroll that far. Now, similarly, Hotjar gives me the ability to see this on phone sessions as well. So I can switch over here, and now I can see that the average on the phone, which we saw in our simulator, gives us just below the header on the welcome message. If I scroll down a little bit further, we can see that to get down to the 50%, we're just at the top of this icon need. So only half of my mobile users have scrolled that far. And if you remember on desktop, that is the very top of the second column. So that tells me only half of my users are seeing the first column of content, and the second and even the third, significantly fewer users are seeing it. So by the time I get down here to where the online chapel is in the right column and that live broadcast and weekly bulletin button, I'm only having a retention of about 30% of my users. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing or that your users are not interacting or missing your content entirely, but it is important to know how your users are interacting. So a lot of these clicks most likely are coming to the navigation, which is top. Right now, this heat map does not show it, but you do have the ability to open pop-ups as well in the heat map, which you can do by clicking this button here. But that's something you can explore on your own if necessary. And I will jump back really quickly just to the taps so we can see. Sure enough, the number one tapped item on our mobile website is the navigation. So perhaps the homepage, mobile users either are not interested in or they know what they're looking for in our navigation, and that's right where they're going. But again, something for us to keep in mind, if we're spending 80% of our webmaster time on trying to make the homepage look really nice, and we love the way we laid it out on desktop, we may be missing majority of our users on mobile, which is over half of our users. So a lot we can learn from watching these Hotjar heat maps and these recordings. And I would encourage everyone to get that set up if you are interested in learning more about your website. One other thing to keep note here. Similar to Google Analytics, Hotjar is only able to collect data on your website once the code is present. So if you're interested in using Hotjar, just like Google Analytics, make sure you follow instructions. We have, just like Analytics, Google Analytics, we have Hotjar instructions available on our support website, and we will share that link at the end here. But if you're interested in using either of these tools, I would encourage you to take the 5 minutes it takes to set up 2 accounts and get them set up today. And then by next week, 2-3 weeks from now, you'll have a lot of data you can start going through and making some decisions on your own and in your own parish to see if there's things that need to change or there's things that you want to do differently. So the last one that we're going to talk about today in terms of analytics is AWStats. AWStats is a powerful and free web analytics tool that can provide valuable insights into your website's traffic and user behavior. And unlike Google Analytics and Hotjar, which require you to add their tracking code to your website, AWStats uses the server logs to generate its information. You don't have to do anything on your end. You don't have to configure your website for it. It's just there. You may have not heard of this one, but if you're using our department for your web hosting, It is already available to you. It's already set up for your website. Since it doesn't depend on that embed code, you might actually log into this if you decide to look at it today and find months or even years of analytics on your website you didn't even know existed. So let's jump over and look at that. So right now in browser, I am showing the cPanel account for All Saints Canonsburg. All of you have, through our hosting, access to cPanel, although majority of users probably aren't logging in using it regularly. You may not need to use it. If you're using Evo or another CMS, you're most likely using that to manage your website entirely. You can do your files through there and everything else. But you do have cPanel access as well. Within cPanel, there's a lot of tools here, and perhaps in the future we can go through these tools more in depth, but the one that I'm going to look at today is AWStats under the metrics. So if I click that, I'm going to have the ability to view it either for my domain name without SSL, so that's HTTP, or with SSL, which is HTTPS. And because all of our websites are forcing that HTTPS for that secure connection, we're going to view the stats for the SSL version now. So the interface is maybe not as polished and refined looking as Google Analytics or Hotjar, but the information is equally as valuable, I would say. When you first load it, it is going to report based on month, although you can change that to daily or hourly. And I'm going to quickly, based on my summary, be able to see that I had 799 unique visitors, which accounted for 956 visits total. So that means some of our visitors came back, but majority of our visitors were new this month. I know that 2,253 pages were accessed, and it's going to give me the breakdown there in terms of pages per visit. And then hits is over 11,000. Hits specifically is going to tell me how many pages were hit in addition to files that were accessed from my site. So that would be images on pages. That would be the CSS and JavaScript that makes up my template, and also PDFs or other files that are being downloaded. So that's kind of the total access of my site there. And then I get to see the bandwidth, so the amount of traffic that's coming through my website. If you happen to have a website that is consuming a lot of bandwidth, this is a great place to start because you can see how much bandwidth your website is consuming, meaning how much traffic is being pulled from your website to other users' computers. And there's some breakdowns here that can be very helpful. Like I mentioned before, this tool is already up and running for everyone, so I can see the monthly history here, and I can actually jump back even further into 2022 and beyond. You could use this to perhaps look back and see how you've performed year over year during, let's say, Lent and Pascha, or if your festival is the same time every year, you can kind of get some information on that. But this is, again, just breaking down more so how many hits I'm getting, pages like that. They do break down by days of the month, so specific days, and then even days of the week. A lot of times, especially with parish websites, we will see spikes on Sundays because people are visiting parish websites on Sundays to gather more information about either what service is happening or view a live broadcast of a service. And then they even break down by hour. There's some locales, and I'm going a little quickly here because I don't know that we need to stick on all of these items, but I would encourage you all to log into your own stats and take a look at them after our webinar. I know the host, which is going to tell me where the users are coming from, specifically what the IP address is of the machine that's accessing our website. I can see robots and spider visitors. So those are visitors that aren't actually browsing our site, but say Google coming to our website and indexing our content. Or we also have Bing in here. There's some Facebook ones and some other indexers here that are making sure that our website can be found outside of our own website. So search engine, things like that. We can see how many times they hit it and when they last visited. So if you're having a problem with, say, your website not showing up in Google at all, there's a lot of tools that can help investigate that. But one thing you can check is, has Google looked at my site? Perhaps you look here and see they haven't looked at it in 10 months. There's a problem there. Either they're being blocked or there's something else going on that's preventing that from happening. But AWStats can help you identify that. I can also see the average visitor duration. I'm sure at this point, a lot of you are realizing a lot of these statistics were also available in Google Analytics as well as Hotjar. So perhaps you wouldn't come to AWStats specifically for these numbers, although you may, and especially if you don't have the other two set up yet, you certainly could. But using the combination of all of these tools can help us paint this more full picture because the information is a little bit different in each spot in terms of the way of presenting. One place that I think is a little more helpful here that we don't really see in a Google Analytics or Hotjar is the file type. So for example, I can see that a lot of my website is JPEG, PNG, and GIF or GIF images that are being consumed by my users. I can also see how many PDFs were downloaded. And if I look at my top 10 downloads, I can see that my latest bulletin has been downloaded 41 times. So if I'm just trying to track the metric of how many people are actually viewing our bulletin, perhaps the bulletin consumes, let's say 8 hours to compile each week to put up on your website. That certainly could be higher than most, but if we were to say 8 hours, and then you look at this number and see there's 6 people downloading it every month. Certainly the print bulletin is very important as well, but you may look and say the amount of time we're spending on these files that we're uploading or the flyers we're uploading versus the amount of people consuming them is very low. Let's try and figure out a different way to do that. Maybe we want to use Bulletin Builder, or we want to do something different to try and streamline this process and make it easier for people to access. So we can gather that information from here. The other thing that we can gather from here is page URLs that are being accessed. So I know that our homepage is the top access page here, but then the next two here are the managers. So if any of you are using the Evolution CMS, which I believe most people on this webinar are, you'll see that that is people who are logging in and accessing the website. So I know that users who access and edit the website are hitting the website pretty frequently. Google Analytics and Hotjar are typically not recording those back-end sessions because that is like a privileged section or an authorized section to access on your website. So a lot of publicly used analytic tools that are using a tracking code, the tracking code gets disabled when a user logs into the site so that it's not tracking that user's experience specifically. So if you are interested in information about managers logging in, you can still gain that from AWStats. And then we can get a little more information about the users' machines that are logging in, the browsers, and then we can even see which search engines are coming through, and we can see some of the key phrases that people are searching for or what they're trying to find. For example, someone was looking specifically for Euro Thursday or Gyro Thursdays here in All Saints, and they were Googling for it, and that's how they were able to find this page. So if we know what people are searching for, we may say, we need to spotlight that better on our homepage. We need to make sure people know exactly where that link is so that they can access it. Or perhaps we say, we know people are trying to find this. They're searching it in Google. Let's post something on social media that links people to it so that people who are following us can get a direct access to the website. So that's all the information that we can gather here through AWStats. So in order to access your AWStats, like I mentioned, you're going to need to log into your cPanel account. And that information was sent to you when your website was first set up on our server. But if you don't happen to have that account information, please reach out to us and we're happy to help you get logged in. You can either create a ticket through support@goers.org, or you can send us an email at internet@goers.org, or call our office number. Whatever it is that works most conveniently for you, we'll help to get you logged in and accessing your system. So at the very beginning of this webinar, we briefly discussed our audience as well as our message. Let's think about that again. After testing our websites and analyzing the data, we should then ask ourselves, are we effectively communicating with the people that we are trying to reach? Perhaps we set out who we think our audience is and what we think our message is, but based on Google Analytics, Hotjar, and maybe even AWStats, we've realized that users are not seeing the content we want them to see or what we think is important. Perhaps they are constantly seeking something else, and we need to find a way to either make our message more accessible in those locations or figure out what message it is they are seeking from our parish. Perhaps we don't think our message is the same as what our users think it should be, and find out how to communicate effectively there. I'm sure by spending the time to analyze your website, you will find areas for improvement. It is our job as webmasters to find these discrepancies and work to resolve them. Perhaps the majority of your users don't scroll past the site carousel, but all of your most important content is displayed below that. You could try updating the carousel to include the most important content there, or maybe even decide to remove your carousel if it's not effective. And instead of putting the carousel there, spotlight content directly at the top of your homepage. Maybe your desktop visitors are regularly seeing a section of your website that your mobile visitors are missing. Try moving that content to a more prominent spot on the page so that it's easily found by all. Did your analytics show that visitors are only visiting the live broadcast page of your website and then leaving? Why not try adding upcoming events, links to your bulletin, or even information on attending your service right next to the video player? A lot of times we will call this in websites dead ends. So you've given someone something and they've gotten to a page that only has one piece of content. And then from there, they're not engaged anymore. So once they're done, they just leave. If we can find these and we can identify where people are leaving our site, the exit clicks, then we would know we could add additional content there. We can add something of value, something that relates to this message we're conveying to our visitors that would then engage them more, allow them to continue being part of our parish, or hopefully push them to our parish, have them come visit our parish, have them become stewards of our parish, have them engage in some way and take action. So there's not only one solution for everyone. I wish I could, say, here's the top 3 things. If you do these 3 things, your website's immediately better. You're good to go. You don't need to worry about it anymore. Each parish is unique and has different goals. Hopefully, the tools demonstrated today can be helpful for your parish to realize the potential of your web presence more fully. Whatever your next steps may be, the important thing is we actually need to take those steps.